Have you ever noticed that sometimes you overreact in situations and you're not really sure why? Or you have this repeating pattern of negative behavior that's pushing the people that you care about in your life away from you? Well, oftentimes these things are triggering one of the 5 core wounds that are developed in childhood. What are the 5 core wounds of childhood? Stay tuned and I'm going to share in this video. Hi, my name is Tiffany Toombs. I'm a trauma and high performance coach that has worked with thousands of people all across the world to let go of their trauma so they can truly step into the version of themselves that they want to be and that they're meant to be. In this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 core wounds of childhood and how these wounds might be showing up in your everyday adult life. So the first core wound is the rejection wound. And this is a wound that's developed anytime that we perceive that we have been rejected while we were growing up. Now, if we perceive that we were rejected because of who we are, because we were too much of something, too loud, too quiet, too smart, too pretty, too much fun, laugh too much, whatever it was, that can also cause us to develop this rejection wound. Now, in those cases, if we feel like we were rejected because of who we are, what happens is we create false identities for ourselves as a way to attempt to get love and connection. Love and connection is one of our primal core human needs. And so anytime we feel like we're not going to be accepted, it actually puts us into a state of survival mode. And it's almost like we become a chameleon. We'll become whoever we believe we need to be accepted in that situation. And we see this happening a lot with kids wanting to fit into the cool group, for example, is that they'll buy the clothes, they'll act however they need to act to be popular and to fit in, but oftentimes they're betraying themselves in that process. Now, if you feel like you have been rejected, maybe you had a parent leave, or you had a parent who just never had time for you. Maybe you were the older sibling or the middle sibling and you felt like all your parents' time and attention went to one of the other siblings. That can also cause the rejection wound. Now, how this shows up in your life is that you have an intense fear of rejection and you believe that people will reject you. So you will take on these false identities: the perfectionist, the people pleaser, the martyr, the victim. There's so many different false identities that you might take on as a way of gaining acceptance from other people. It also means you're less likely to take risk or ask for opportunities in the future because you're afraid you're going to be rejected. In your business or in your career, that means you're going to hold yourself back. You're not going to play full out and fully show up because you're afraid that people will reject you. You also likely won't charge your worth in your business because you believe that people will reject you and they won't pay you that amount of money. In relationships, it means that we will tend to become codependent or will tend to stay in toxic relationships that don't really fulfill us, or maybe are even abusive because we're worried that nobody else will ever love us again. And so we stay where we are accepted or where we're, people put up with us because we fear that if this person leaves, then everybody else will reject us down the road. The second childhood wound is the abandonment wound. And this one often ties together with the rejection wound, so it's not uncommon for people to have both an abandonment and a rejection wound. The abandonment wound is anytime we feel that we were abandoned. Now, this can be physical abandonment, as in we were left alone for a long period of time and we didn't know when somebody was going to come and get us. It could be that we were put to bed in our crib as a baby or put to bed in our room alone, and when we cried out and we were asking for love or we were asking for support, we didn't get it. It can also be emotional abandonment. This can be a parent who might deny our feelings. This might be a parent who is emotionally unavailable, so maybe they can't tell us that they love us or that they're proud of us. They can't validate and build us up in any way. Or it could be a parent who's physically present, but they're just emotionally not there. It's like, you know, they come home, they have a couple drinks, they sit in front of the TV and they just watch TV and zone out, and they don't really engage with us or talk with us at all. That can lead to an abandonment wound as well. Having an abandonment wound leads us to believe that everybody in our life will ultimately abandon us. So this can show up in that we create codependent relationships with intimate partners, with colleagues, with friends, with business partners, where we feel like we can't survive without them and we are always seeking their validation to know that we're okay. It can also cause us to abandon our own needs to please somebody else's needs in order to make sure that that person stays. Now, interestingly, because the person has this fear of being abandoned, what it can also mean is that they will behave in a way that pushes people closest to them away to validate that everybody will leave. So in a past relationship, when I had not dealt with my personal abandonment wound, what happened was I remember saying to one of my exes, "You'll find somebody better than me. One day you'll end up leaving me." And he would always say, no, that's not true, that's not true. But what I was doing is I was energetically pushing him away to validate that belief system. So we want to become aware that these core wounds can actually cause us to act in ways that validate the wound itself. It causes us to push people away so that they then reject us or abandon us so that we can say, "See, I told you so." And it's really just us repeating that old wound over and over and over again until we heal it. Now, before I share with you the next 2 core wounds, I would love to hear from you. After hearing about the first 2 core wounds, do you feel that you have one of them? Go to the comments below and let me know which one. The third core wound that we develop in childhood is known as the humiliation wound. And this can come from being bullied, whether that's by somebody at school, by a parent, by a sibling, by a family member. It can come from families who play pranks on each other and pranks go a little bit too far. It can even happen in families that only know how to show love through sarcasm and making jokes at somebody else's expense. What ultimately happens is that this person feels that it's not safe for them to be seen, it's not safe for them to stand out, it's not safe to share their opinion or their voice because they're going to end up humiliated. Oftentimes, embarrassment, guilt, and shame were heavy tools that were used to control their behavior growing up. And anytime they didn't act in the way that they were expected, they were humiliated through guilt, through shame, or through embarrassment, or through somebody pointing out and catastrophizing their mistakes. In adulthood, this looks like somebody who doesn't take risks because they are terrified of making a mistake. It doesn't matter how big or how small the mistake is, everything is a catastrophe. This also leads to people being a little bit of a wallflower. They become the invisible person where they blend into the background and they never truly want to stand out because standing out and being seen means you increase your risk of being humiliated. So these people kind of tend to fade into the background and they never really want to be seen, which means they never really share their gifts or their genius with the world because they don't want to be humiliated by it. People who have had guilt and shame used against them will often tend to guilt themselves for every little perceived indiscretion as well. So guilt and shame become a tool that they continue to use for themselves and potentially even others to control their behavior and other people's. The fourth core wound that comes from childhood is known as the injustice wound. And this can happen anytime we felt there was a lack of equality. Now, within the family unit, this can be that the parents said all the kids are going to be treated equal, but there was favoritism towards one or more of the children. Maybe you felt like you got the worst end of the stick, you had more chores, you had things tougher, things didn't come as easy for you. That can create an injustice wound. Anytime you feel like saying, that's not fair, that's the sign of having an injustice wound. In the classroom, if you were not the teacher's favorite or you were the teacher's least favorite and the teacher picked on you all the time, that can create an injustice wound. And in the current world right now, we're seeing a lot of injustice wound playing out. So people who have ever experienced any form of oppression, from racism, sexism, oppression because of their gender identity, oppression because of their sexuality, because of their financial status, their education, whatever it is, their physical abilities, their mental abilities. We see the injustice wound playing out in society right now. And this comes from a belief that not everybody will be treated fairly, that not everybody will get the equal opportunity, and that things are just not fair for that person. Now, the injustice wound can cause us to go into a little bit of a victim mentality, where then we expect that we are going to be oppressed or we're going to be held back. And so we don't ask for opportunities. Now, I'm not by any means saying that racism and other forms of oppression don't occur. They absolutely do. And what I want you to see is that that can then filter your perception of future events, where you always believe that things will be unfair for you. And if you always believe things are going to be unfair for you, or you believe that you've lost before you even make the attempt, then you either won't fully show up or you won't show up at all. You won't give any effort because you don't want to waste your time because of this injustice wound that you have. Now, before I share with you the fifth and final core childhood wound, I want to remind you to subscribe to my channel. I am putting out brand new videos just like this one every single week to help you heal trauma, let go of these wounds and the patterns that come with them, so that you can truly step into the version of you that you are meant to be. So go ahead, click that subscribe button below and like this video while you're there. The fifth core human wound is the betrayal wound. And this happens anytime we feel somebody has betrayed us. Maybe we shared a secret with somebody and they went and told other people. Maybe we asked somebody to show up for us in a certain way and they didn't do that. This can again often be tied to a humiliation wound. It can be tied to an abandonment wound, where we feel like it doesn't matter what we do or who the person is, that they're going to betray us and let us down. If you had a parent who continually made promises to you and never followed through on them, but expected you to follow through on yours, that can also cause a betrayal wound. Now, having the betrayal wound means that we have very little trust of other people, but it also tends to mean that we disconnect from ourselves. We start to not trust ourselves because we begin to betray ourselves in the process. If we believe that everybody else is going to betray us, we might take on some of those traits that the rejection and abandonment wound had, where we start to betray our own needs in order to get what other people want. We start to betray our own feelings rather than saying, you know what, you really let me down here. Saying, oh, it's okay, I totally understand, your life is busy. And so we start to betray our own needs, our own feelings, in order to make other people feel comfortable, which can lead to a lack of inner trust, a disconnection from our own intuition, from our higher self, and that can cause us to fall prey to behaviors like procrastination or self-sabotage, where we're not fully showing up or going after what we want because we don't believe that we'll be consistent, we don't believe that we'll take action, we don't believe we'll follow through. So we ultimately create a very lonely life for us when we have a betrayal wound, because we feel like we can't trust anybody else, but we also can't trust ourselves. Now, after listening to this video, you might be thinking, I have more than one of those core childhood wounds. Maybe you have all five. That actually is more common than what you think it is. There's a lot more experiences that qualify as traumatic, especially to the childhood mind, than what most people realize. So what I've done is I've put together a free quiz to show you some examples. It's by no means an exhaustive list, but to show you some examples of what trauma could be, where you might have developed some trauma, and then I'm actually going to give you a trauma score. And these trauma scores have been correlated through numerous studies over the years with different types of behavior. Everything from what your likelihood of having a mental health condition is, to your financial stability, and so much more. So if you want to find out what your trauma score is and what that means for you if you don't heal, it's never, by the way, your trauma is never a doom sentence toward living a certain life, but to have some idea of how it might be impacting you, go to mytraumascore.com or click on the link in the description below, and you'll be able to find out how your trauma is impacting you. Thanks for watching.